Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can have a seat and lower your hand. If you'll state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
My name is Holly Worden, last name spelled Worden.
All right, state.
Who do you work for?
I work for the Bexar County Crime Lab.
And what do you do for the Vernon Crime Lab?
I am a forensic scientist in the Firearm and Toolmark section.
And what do you specifically do there?
So some of my main job duties are examining firearm related evidence that's collected from things like crime scenes. So I'll examine firearms, function test them to determine if they're operating or not. And I'll look at fired bullets and fired cartridge cases and perform a microscopic comparison of those to determine if they were fired in the same firearm or not. Those are some of my main duties.
How would you make a determination whether or not two projectiles were fired from the same gun?
So I have a piece of equipment called a comparison microscope, and it's essentially like two microscopes that are connected by something called an optical bridge. And what it's allowing me to do is look at two items, or in this case, bullets, at the same time and at the same magnification. And I'm looking at tool marks that are left on the bullet from a firearm that fired them. Each firearm has its own pattern or signature of tool marks that are left on the bullet. And so when I perform a comparison of those, I'm comparing the pattern of those tool marks. And if I see that the pattern is in sufficient agreement, then I can conclude that those two bullets were fired from the same firearm.
So you keep saying the word tool marks. What do you mean by that?
So a tool mark would be essentially anything that's made when a harder object impacts a softer object. So that could be something like a scratch or an impression.
And generally with firearms, are these unique to every firearm?
Yes, so every firearm has its own signature, own pattern of tool marks that are left. So if you had firearms that were even consecutively made on the same equipment, based on the manufacturing process, there's microscopic irregularities that are made on that firearm that leave different patterns on a bullet or on a fired cartridge case.
Now, did you perform a examination of any projectiles in this case?
Yes, I did.
And under what case number did this fall?
So our laboratory has a CIL number, or a criminal investigation laboratory number, and that is a number that our laboratory generates when submissions come in from different agencies. And so the CIL number for this case was 22-03458.
And how many projectiles did you examine?
I had two.
What's already been entered as State's Exhibits number 31A and 31B. Do you recognize these packages?
Yes, I do.
What are these packages?
These are envelopes that I received. I recognize the CIL number, the item number I placed on them, my initials, and the date that I would have opened these packages.
And what examination did you perform on these projectiles?
So essentially, I would have examined them, filled out a worksheet that has various items that I document. So I would be examining the bullets for their caliber. I would be taking measurements of them, determining what type of rifling characteristics are on them, or markings that the barrel of a firearm would leave on the bullets. And besides that, I would also have performed the microscopic comparison of both of these items to each other.
And I'm going to show you what's already been entered as State's Exhibit 36. Was this one of the projectiles that you examined? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oops. Yes. State's 36.
Yes, I recognize that.
And this is one of the projectiles you inspected.
Yes.
And which envelope does that correspond to?
That would have been 31A.
And I'm gonna show you. Full Martin States exhibit number 37. Is this another one? Is this the other projectile that you expect?
Yes, it is.
And what envelope does that correspond to?
That would have been 31B.
And after performing an inspection, what did you find, or what did you observe when comparing these two projectiles?
So when I evaluated these, I determined that they were consistent with being either 38 special caliber or 38 special plus P caliber bullets. And when I performed the microscopic comparison to them, I determined that they were both fired from the same firearm due to the features that I looked at, the class characteristics and the individual or the signature unique characteristics.
And so you said 38 special caliber. What type of firearm would fire that type of bullet?
38 special is typical of revolvers.
Can you read that down?
38 special is that caliber is typical of revolvers.
And is that type of firearm, is that considered a deadly weapon?
Yes,
So based off of your observations, you're able to tell that these two projectiles both came from the same gun, is that correct?
yes,
And that you were able to also determine based off of further observation that they came from some sort of revolver.
most likely a revolver. Yes.
That's what's.
Good
Defense.
afternoon, how are you today?
I'm good.
I have just a few quick questions for you, okay?
Okay.
When did you examine these projectiles?
I'm just referring to my notes for
Sure.
that. It looks to be that I started on October 27th of 2022 and generated my report on October 28th, 2022.
So this would have been sometime after the alleged incident where these items were recovered,
As far as I know, yes.
as far as you know, okay? Now, your analysis is on projectiles, but you can also analyze, say, shell casings, right?
Yes, I can.
For example, if shell casings are fired from the same weapon, they would have the same marks, the same indicators that they were fired from the same weapon, right?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and tell the jury what some of those things are, those marks.
So if I had looked at a fired cartridge case, which is this part of the piece of ammunition, this is a demonstrative aid. So this is also loaded in the firearm, and markings on this are from things like the firing pin of the firearm. And the markings also come from the area around the firing pin called the breech face.
That Brooks witness.
Yes.
Your Honor? Glad you brought that, because that's gonna help. In analyzing the markings on the bullets, the muzzle of the weapon has certain striations, certain dents in it, correct?
Yes,
And that's part of the evidence that you use to determine if it's the same weapon, right?
correct.
Okay, and that's what you did in this case.
Yes, with the bullets.
Okay, and I know this doesn't have the markings in it, the grooves that we call them. And there's a lot of ladies here, and I'm not sure if any of them looked down the barrel of a gun before. But could you explain what those grooves are for?
So just to be clear, this isn't a barrel, this is a cartridge case, but for a barrel of a firearm, the grooves that are cut in the barrel help the bullet be stable in flight.
Right.
So as the bullet passes through the barrel, it spins, it imparts spin on it, and that keeps it stable in flight. Similar to if you were to throw a football, the football kind of spins versus tumbling. If it tumbled, it wouldn't be as accurate.
Okay. And the whole purpose of that is to give the bullet greater stability.
Yes.
Now, the last thing you said is that you thought this might have been a revolver.
Yes, so the caliber of the 38 special caliber is typical of revolvers. There have not been nearly as many pistols made in that caliber. And it's typically associated with being a type of revolver ammunition.
Okay, now 38 is just the caliber, that's the size, the dimension of the bullet, right?
Yes, it's the name of it. It's close to that amount in inches. Different cartridges, the names of them are a little complicated with how they came up with them, but it relates to a certain size of the firearm barrel.
Yeah, and just to make sure that the jury understands this, a 22 caliber bullet is going to be a smaller bullet, say, than a 44 caliber bullet.
Yes.
Okay. And the 38 is basically the same size as a 9mm bullet, right?
They're pretty close in size. There's very, very slight difference, but very, very close.
And when you say revolver, that is a guess on your part, but you don't have anything specific to say that, do you?
To say specifically a revolver. So when I looked at these bullets, I took measurements of the impressions that the grooves of the barrel would have left. And I searched a database, and that database gives me a list of possible firearms that have those same dimensions that were on this bullet. That those firearms have the same groove dimensions. And the list was, the majority of them were revolvers. There were a few pistols listed, but those are very uncommon pistols, so they're on there.
One last question. If someone described as a gun as an old Western gun, that's generally a revolver, right?
That's typically what I would think of if I thought of a Western gun.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
State.
Nothing but the same.
All right, is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse Your Honor.
rule?
Excuse, Your Honor.
Thank you. Rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state or the defense. All right, thank you. You may step down.